Good morning team. So today we can discuss about PostgreSQL security options, which is module 11. Okay, so if you think about community version of Postgres because of its open source, so most of the organizations will see about the security options. What are the different security options we have in Postgres, right? When you think about any cloud vendors, so you have better security options, right? Like they will provide the encryption at the storage layer, and you can also provide security with VPC, and you can provide security with providing ingress and outbound rules, right? So in cloud we have various options, but when you install your Postgres cluster in community version, okay, so we need to think and we need to see what are the security options we have. Okay, so in this module, like we are going to discuss what are the security options we have in open source community, and we are going to discuss what is host-based access control and and we are going to discuss what is OpenSSL, how we can provide security with OpenSSL. Okay. And we can discuss about what is logging and auditing. Okay, and what are the options we have for data encryption in Postgres with PG crypto extension. Okay. As we know, if you take any database, these are the three different levels where we can provide security. One is at the network level, and at the transport level, and at the database level. So now in this module, we are going to discuss more about the database level. Okay. So if you think about network level, so we know that we can provide with Unix sockets, right? Unix domain sockets and TCP/IP sockets and firewalls, right? So Unix team will enable firewalls. Okay. So and at the transport level, so when you create the Postgres cluster with SSL options, okay, your client has to connect with SSL. Then the communication is very secure, right? Because your database is configured with SSL, and your client has to connect with client certificate to the database to access any tables, right? So this is secure communication. Basically, this also we can provide in the transport level security. Okay, and this database level security and transport level security are both dependent, because at the database level, when you install the Postgres cluster, you have to install with OpenSSL option. If you remember in the initial classes, okay, when we discuss about the open source installation, so by using the source method, so we have installed with the OpenSSL option, right? We have an option with OpenSSL basically. So with the help of OpenSSL, we can able to configure, or we can able to install the cluster. Okay, OpenSSL, we can use any of the Linux algorithm, right? So you can create the SSL certificates, and so here you have public certificates, private certificates, right? So in this certificates, you have the server certificate, client certificate. Okay, so client has to use that client certificate, and they can able to establish a connection with the SSL options. Okay, and at the database level, there are different options that we can provide security. One is with the roles and passwords, okay, and permissions, right? And we also have an option called row level security, where we can provide at the row level, right? If any user wants to provide security, for example, you have an employee table. Okay, in that employee table, you have a salary column, right? So you have to give permission to see his own salary, not the other salaries, right? So in this scenario, you have to provide row level security by creating the policies. So there is an option called policy in Postgres. You have to create those policies, and you can provide security at the row level. So this also we'll see practically how we can provide, right? And as usual, the host-based authentication, which is important file pghpa.conf, where we have to define the rules, or you have to define the authentication method, the IP address range, which IPs you have to connect. Okay, this all things you have to define in pghpa.conf, and logging and editing as well. Okay. So basically with the help of editing, we cannot provide security, but we can prevent some security. Like if you log anything, for example, if any user drop a table, how we can identify. So this kind of editing we can provide. So there is an extension called PG Edit, which is a most powerful. Most organizations will use this PG Edit extension for editing purpose. So this also we'll see practically. So we can go one by one how we can provide database level security. Okay. The first one is host based authentication. So this is very important file. Whenever you first initialize the cluster, the first thing what we have to do, we have to change the password of the Postgres user, right? This is the first thing which we have to do whenever you install the cluster, and later you have to change the necessary parameters based on your system resources. So you can use PG tune option to enable the parameters, right? And the third thing is, the main important thing is you have to define the pghpa.conf. The authentication method is one of the important. Okay, the recommended method is Scrum-Share 256 or MD5. These are the two authentication methods which is recommended in terms of security. So you have different uh, methods as well. One is you have trust, you have password. Okay, there are different authentication methods as well, but those are all not recommended. So you have to use either MD5 or Scrum-Share 256. Scrum-Share 256 is still secure than MD5. Okay, at least these two methods you have to use in terms of security, because if you give password, the password will not be encrypted in the network layer, right? When you connect, and when you give trust, users doesn't need any password to authenticate. So those two is not recommended. Either you have to go with MD5 or Scrum-Share 256, which is recommended for security. And here you have to define whether the connection is from the local Unix socket or you are connecting from remote machines, right? So if local, by default, it is enabled in the local. And if you want to connect from any remote machines, you have to define the IP ranges in the IPv4 connections, right? And you can define these ranges and you can restrict the IPs as well. Okay, in the CADR format, or you want to define the address, only the application IP ranges, okay, or application IP directly, you can just define here. So this is the one of the main important area that you can provide security in terms of password, and to restrict the IPs, a specific IPs, and to restrict a specific user, a specific database. So basically, if you create any user is a specific to cluster level, right? So they can connect to any of the database. If you want to restrict, this user has to only allow to this database, you can define here. This is the file where you can define. If you give all, then he can able to connect to any of the databases. Okay. So these kind of restrictions based on the application requirement, you have to define in the pghpa.conf. This is one of the important file that we need to concentrate, right? In the initial stage of your Postgres build, right? After you build, you have to take care of this as a part of your parameters. So this is one of the important authentication file, okay, where we have to take care as a DBA, right? Whenever any client wants to connect, we can restrict based on these IPs and authentication method, which is very important. So by default, when you initialize the cluster with M repository, by default you will get the trust. Later you have to change it to Scrum-Share 256 or MD5. Now we can discuss more about the logging and editing. So first we can discuss about the logging. So logging is also very important to enable after you build the cluster, right? So after you build the cluster, you have to take care of all these things. You have to change the password, you have to enable necessary parameters, you have to enable pghpa.conf, and you have to create backups, you have to schedule the backup policies, and then logging. So you also need to define the logging, right? So what is a logging? As we know, there is one of the background process called logger process, right? Log collector, who will write the information into your alert log, right? If any warnings, if any failures, or if any panic information or this kind of events, if it captures in the alert log, okay, this logger process will capture and writes the information into the alert log. By default, alert log will be in PG data log. Yeah, sorry. So by default, your log file will be in PG data log folder, right? Even we can change this location as a DBA by defining the parameters. Like if you don't want the alert log location in the PG data location, if you want in any different location, so there is a parameter called log directory. Okay, in the log directory, you have to define in which directory you have to write the information. You have to enable the alert log information, right? So by default, whenever you initialize the cluster with the M repository or RPM method, by default this logging will be on. Okay, but when you install cluster with source method, by default this log collector is not on. So as a DBA, we have to make it on, and we have to define the parameters, what to log, when to log, and where to log, right? So this we need to take care when we initialize the cluster. And we'll see practically what are the best practices and best standards to enable the logging, especially what to log, like what information that we need to log in the alert log, and when we need to log, and where we need to log. Basically, we have to define this in terms of parameters. For example, if you think about where to log, okay, so you have to define which location you have to log the this logging process, and you have to define the format of the log file. For example, by default, you will get the week name, like it will log with week name like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and again it will override the Monday file. Okay, which is not good format. Actually, we have to change this format. If you give with the date format, basically it will generate every day, right? The log file. If you want like one month or 2 months or 3 months backlog, you will not get with the default format. So we have to change the default format to a different format. That we'll see how we can change the format of the log file. Okay, and then we have to think what to log. So we can log so much information in the logging, but it's not recommended that everything needs to be logged. For example, so we have checkpoint information. Checkpoint information is very useful, right, to log information in the alert log, because when you want to do any point in time recovery, or if you want to set up any replication, this checkpoint information is much needed in the alert log. So we are going to enable the checkpoint to be logged in the alert log. And we also need the connection details, like what are the client connections that is going to connect to the database, and disconnection details. So that is also very important. Even that we will enable, right? And we have one more important parameter called log underscore statement, where we have to define which kind of statements that we need to log in the alert log, like DDL information, DML information, or if you are doing any maintenance activities, like you want to log vacuuming information, or you want to log analyze information, these things and all we have to define. So we'll see practically what are the best practices we need to log as a part of the logging process. By default, you will get some default settings, but later you have to change based on your requirement. So that we'll see practically how we can, enable logging. And we have editing. So basically, you may have a doubt like we already have logging, and why we need editing, right? So in logging also we can define whether you need DML statements or DDL statements, right? But what is the use of the editing? So basically in editing, you have still more flexible options, and it will write more information in the editing, like when the session is logging with the timings, and from which database he connects, and from which user, from which IP it has came, the connection, and it also define whether it is a select statement or it's a delete statement. Okay, along with the additional information, you can get in the editing with the help of pgedit extension. Okay, so Postgres is a open source, right? We have to, if you want to get some rich functionality like editing security, you have to go with some open source extensions, basically. So extension is nothing but just a additional package to your binaries. Okay, we have the next module about the extension, and there you will understand very clearly internals of extension, what is extension and how the extension looks like. Okay, so those things you will see in the next module. For now, extension is just a external package that we need to attach to our binaries to get some functionalities like editing security and any of the options. For example, in replication, we have seen about rep manager, right? So with the help of rep manager, we have automatic failover and switchovers we have seen. That is an extension. Similarly, we have to go with pgedit extension, and there is one more extension called pgedit log to file. Okay. So it's not good to log everything with the logging process. We have to go with the separate editing for some ISO edit purpose in companies, right? So with the help of editing, pgedit extension, you will get some good extra information that needs to be written in the separate edit log file. Okay. So this we'll see how we can enable the pgedit extension and how we can enable the database editing. So in the logging process is entire at the cluster level, right? You don't have option that you need to log to specific database, to specific user, only you need to log in the alert log. It's not possible like to enable, right? So you have to enable at the entire cluster level. Whereas in the editing, you have some flexibility that you need to edit only a specific user. You need to edit only read operations. You need to edit only delete operations. So this kind of options you have in the pgedit. Okay, so at the specific user level, you have at the specific database level also, you can enable the editing. So this editing is an open source, right? So we can download and we can use this extension basically. So this extension is not part of our contrib modules. You have to externally install this pgedit as a package, or you can go directly with the source code method. Okay. So this also we'll see practically how we can enable the and keep track of all our SQL operations with the help of pgedit. Okay, so you have more capabilities in the pgedit when compared with logging, the default logging option. So next, when coming to encryption options, so what are the different types of encryption options we have in Postgres, right? So one is at the password level, we have password underscore encryption, right? So there is a parameter where by default it is a Scrum SHA 256 and which is preferred. So when you create any user, by default that user password will be encrypted, right? So by using Scrum SHA 256 algorithm. So, and the authentication method also we have, it's recommended to use the Scrum SHA 256, right? So this is one encryption option that by default in Postgres it is defined, right? And then at the storage layer, if you want to encrypt the file system level, so we have some operating system options right at the storage level as well, right? So if you think, so with the help of storage team, you want to encrypt the data at the rest at the file system level, so you can use that option as well in terms of data partitioning encryption, right? And at the database level, if you want to provide any security at the column level, for example, there is a extension called PG Crypto, which is most popular and which is useful. Okay, if you want similarly like Oracle TDE, so with the help of TDE, we can enable security at the table space level, at the column level, right? Similarly, by using this PG Crypto, we can only enable at the specific column level. Okay, So we cannot enable at the table space level in Postgres. We can enable at the column level. So if you want to encrypt a specific column, we have to go with a PG crypto extension, which will allow us to encrypt the data at a specific column level, okay, in a table, similarly like TDE in Oracle. Okay, so the thing is in PG crypto, you have to define which algorithm you have to use for encryption and decryption. Okay, so that we will see practically how we can enable column level encryption using PG crypto extension. Okay, and one more important thing is SSL connections. So if you define or if you enable your cluster with open SSL connections, okay, you have to uh, think about more in some areas, like you have pghpa.conf, right? In pghpa.conf, you have to allow, instead of host, you have to allow host SSL. Okay, if you see this, here we have local and host, right? But if you enable your cluster in OpenSSL, you have to give here host SSL in hpa.conf, right? To encrypt your connections from in the network layer, right? So this is also very important that we need to think, if your system is PCI system, production PCI systems, you can go with the SSL option. Okay, while initializing the cluster, you can use the OpenSSL option, and you can give the client connect certificate to the client. Okay, so they can use that client certificate and they can connect with any of the application tools. Like if you think about PG admin, so there you also have an option to add the certificates, client certificate as well. Okay, so this is one important thing we can enable. If your system is really a production and it's a PCI system, you can enable the cluster with OpenSSL option. Okay, at the server side, we manage with the server certificates. At the client, they have to use the client certificate. Okay, so this is something that we can enable the SSL configurations. So this is about the server side configuration. This is about the client side encryption, that we have to provide the client certificates. And if you think about if you choose any Postgres in the cloud, okay, it may be Google, Amazon, or um, uh, any of the cloud vendor. Okay, so by default, you can enable the certificates with the help of open SSL certificates. You can configure your Postgres, and you can download those certificates to connect to this Postgres cluster, right? So even you can give your client certificate to your application team to connect, right? And you also have different authentication methods, like so they can use um, cloud proxy authentication, or they can use service account to connect, right? So you have different options in cloud. But if you think about on-premises, we have to define only on your operating system encryption algorithms, right? So like SSH key and RSA algorithm, we have different operating system algorithms. So with the help of that algorithms only, we can generate the keys, and with that keys, we can able to provide security at the database level. We can only allow the SSL connections in the hpa.conf, so that in the network layer, the communication will be in encrypted format. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, just adding to Suresh. Okay, so right nowadays PostgreSQL, as Suresh said, it is widely available on the like clouds. Okay, either it may be Amazon or it may be from Azure or GCP, Google Cloud. So they're like cloud means everyone like is expecting some high level security, right? So in case of PostgreSQL on top of the cloud, as Suresh said, like we are going to have a different level of security. So maybe the first thing is maybe we can host, or maybe we can create at the project level security, or maybe we can create first level of security with VPCs. Okay, that is the first level of security. And second level of security, we can get it and we can enable the IAM authentication. Okay, so that is the second level of security we can provide. Instead of giving individual access to the users, okay, we can provide the IAM authentication on top of like application any service account. Okay, so then third level of security, like as Suresh said, the SSL certificate. So it means we are going to create the SSL certificates for our databases. So it is including three certificates. One is the server certificate, and the second one is the client certificate, and the third one is the client key. So either like we can enable the IAM authentication and application users make a connection to the applications with help of cloud authentication proxy. They are able to done from their side. So then with help of IAM authentication, they are able to access our databases. Okay, so why? Because giving certificate, SSL certificate to application team, it makes maybe we can say we are going to break the one level of security. So that is the reason either we can give the client certificate to them, otherwise we can provide the IAM authentication to the service account. The service account may be from application any host. It may be Kubernetes engine, it may be any compute engine the application is hosting. So based on the requirement. Okay, so even we can directly give the SSL certificates to them also, the client key and client certificate if you provide to them. So with help of the username and password, they can use either, as Suresh said, okay, either they can use the PG admin. PG admin, I think we skip the PG admin and we will show you how to make a connection with help of the SSL and everything, maybe in tomorrow class or day after tomorrow classes. Okay, so they are able to make a connection with help of the SSL certificates by using the username and password which we created for application team. Okay, so this is the one way, but the problem is if we give the SSL certificates to application team, they may be okay, they may be sometimes they may be corrupted that certificate. Again, we need to shareable to them. So in that case, we can the good option is we can take the service account for either Kubernetes engine or maybe a GC engine for application. So then after what we can do, we can provide the IAM authentication with help of the connectors. Okay, the connectors may be anything. Okay, it may be Java connector, it may be Python connector, it may be the PG admin. Okay, the relevant connector for the Postgres SQL connectivity, and they're able to make a connection. So this is the some of the options we have in the cloud vendors. Cloud may be anything, but these are the some of the options we have widely using on our real-time systems. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. So actually we need to worry more about when we have Postgres in on-prem, right? So when our Postgres is in on-prem, and if you're using any community version, then we need to think about more options, right? But if your cluster is in cloud, okay, you have so many options, and it's good secure in cloud. Yeah. So now when you come to PG crypto extension, so with the help of this PG crypto extension, we are going to provide security at the column level. So we have option with the help of PG crypto. When you install this extension, so you will get so many encryption algorithm. One of the most powerful or important algorithm is PGP SIM encrypt and PGP SIM decrypt. Okay, this is the two important algorithms, which means pretty good privacy algorithm. Okay, so with the help of these two algorithms, we are going to provide security at the column level. Okay, so that we'll see practically how we can do that. So along with these algorithms, we also have so many different algorithms which comes along with the extension. But if you want exactly same like Oracle TDE, if you want to provide encryption at the column level, this is the best option that we can use. PGP, pretty good privacy algorithm. Okay, and the only thing is whenever you want to select the data, for example, you have enable the column and you want to fetch the data of that particular column, you have to use this encryption always while encrypting the data, and while fetching the data, you have to use the decrypt algorithm. So these are the two external algorithms. This you have to call while fetching the data, or when you are inserting or updating the data, you have to use encrypt. While decrypting the data, you have to use the decrypt keyword. So these are the two which they have to use at the application side always whenever they want to fetch the data. They have to use this decrypt keyword. So this is one drawback. But the thing is, we have some other workarounds. Like if you want to create any specific procedure, not to explicitly call every time this encryption and decryption, with the help of that procedure, we can manage. Okay, this is one thing that we need to keep in mind. So with the help of PG crypto, you have a good security options at the column level. Okay, so this PG crypto can be created if you have any create privilege. Okay, you don't need to be as a super user. You can create if you have create privilege option in that specific database. And this all extensions is specific to database, not at the cluster level. Okay, so few of the extensions will work at the cluster level, but most of them will work at the database level. If you want to enable some in some other database, you also need to configure this PG crypto in that database as well, this extension. Okay, so this we'll see practically how we can enable this PG crypto and how we can provide security at the column level of a table. Okay, so if you have an EMP table and if you want to encrypt the salary details, you can use this algorithm, PGP algorithm, and we can, encrypt it. So we'll see practically to understand better. And this PG crypto requires the OpenSSL by default. Okay, so with the help of OpenSSL only, we can use this PG crypto, make use of this PG crypto with OpenSSLs. Okay, otherwise it will not support. Okay, for normal build clusters. Yeah. So yeah, the security is one important, and you need to remember one more thing. If you provide more security, you will also have less performance, right? So both are obviously proportional. Or if you provide more security, you will get less performance, right? Obviously, that point also we need to remember. So based on the requirement only, we have to provide different levels of security and editing process. So now let's see practically few of the things. First, we'll see about the logging process, because logging is very important for DBA when we initialize the cluster. Okay. So as we know, if you give PS minus prep Postgres, you have a process called logger. So this logger process by default enable when you initialize the cluster in RPM method or M installation, right? But when you go with the source installation, this background process by default disable. You have a parameter called logging collector. So by default, this is on when you go with the M method or RPM method. Okay. But when you go with the source installation, by default, this is off. We have to make it on to get this logger process on. Okay. So if this is running, then your log collector is on. Okay. If this process is not running, it is off. Okay. You have to on it. And this logger process will capture the events like warning information, panic information, everything, and it writes in the alert log, right? So this is the one thing, and we can go and see what are the main important parameters that we need to configure as a part of the logging. So we have PostgreSQL.confi. If you just check with the logging keyword, there is a separate logging section in the alert log. So if you see where to log, okay, so we have to define where to log. And if you come, you have to define when to log, and we have to define what to log. These are the important. So by default, few of them is disabled. So we have to enable as a DBA based on our requirement. So we'll see what are some best options that we need to enable. Okay. The first important parameter is log destination. So by default, your alert log will be written in a text format, right? So it returns in the text format. From version 15, they also introduced some of the new options called CSV format. if you want your alert log to be written in the CSV format or JSON log format or sys log format, you can use these options. Okay, by default it is standard error, which means it is text format. Okay, so this is the default value. And logging collector, this we need to enable, right, to capture all the events. This is important. And log directory, so log directory by default log, right? So which means your default location of your alert log is pg data. In the pg data you have a folder called log. Okay, so if you see directory log files are written pg data, so inside pg data you have folder called log. Okay, in that log you can it will write the logging information. So if you want, you can change this directory. If you don't want in the pg data location, you can change in the different directory. And log file, so this is very important, right? So log file, if you see, this is the default format. So we should not use the default format because for example, if you go to the log location, so we are in the pg data log location. You see, this is the so this is the logging. This is the alert log, right? If you see, it is writing every day, which is the week format: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and so on. Okay. Again, when it comes to Monday, it will overwrite this file. You can only have only 1 week of alert log, right? So this is not a recommended standard, recommended way, recommended format. So what we can do, we can just change this to this format. Okay. For example, so I want to log like day, month, and year. Okay, I want this format basically, which means it generates every day, right? And your whole log will be managed with the help of this truncate options. This we'll see. Okay, so this log truncate by default it will be on. This will be truncate based on these two parameters. Okay, so your alert log will be truncate. Since if you see when I do ls minus LTR, I have only 1 day log, right? Because by default your alert log retention is 1 day. So after 1 day, automatically your old log will be purged. So in real time, this has to be like more value, like 90 days or 120 days based on your requirement. Okay, you have to increase the retention period. It should be not 1 day. You can define retention parameters in two formats. One is age format and size format. Age means you can define in the number of days. You want 90 days, you want 30 days. Okay, based on your criticality, you can define the retention of in terms of number of days. Or you can also define in terms of size. For example, if your alert log becomes 1 GB, okay, if you want to truncate or if you want to rotate the log, you can define the size as well. Either you have to give rotation age or you have to give the size. Both will not work parallelly. You want to disable one parameter and you have to enable one. Okay, if you see 0 means disable. By default, size is disabled, and by default, it is in terms of age, which means number of days. Okay, this we can increase to no big value, maybe 90 days or 190 days based on your requirement. If it is a production, you can go with the more days, and if it is a non-production, you can go with some 30 days or 60 days based on your retention. So this log truncate will be truncate or rotate your log based on these two parameters you define. Okay. Now we have changed the format. Let's go and restart the cluster because this is static parameter. Okay. So I'm going to restart my cluster. You can just go to log directly and you can see it is generated in this format. Okay. So again, when when you come to the next Monday, so it won't override in this scenario, right? It will write in this format. So it will be every day, it will keep on log with the date format. So it's easy for you to go and check 1 month log, previous 1 month log, and so on, right? And based on your retention period, your log will be rotated after 90 days or something. So this is something recommended format to enable instead of this default format. Now, when you open the MostSQL.conf, you have still some more options. Okay, so this is something that we need to think about where to log. Okay, now when you come to what to log, okay, first we'll see when to log. Okay, so by default, when to log is warning, which means at what events it has to write. Okay, by default it is warning. Warning means if you see, if you get any warning errors, it will write in the alert log. If you get any errors, it will write in the alert log. If you get log, it will write. If you get any fatal errors, if you get any panic, so this all information will be written. If you define warning, so by default it is warning. So this all things will be written. For example, if you define here something called debug file, okay, it will write debug 4, debug 3, all this information will be written in the logging, in the alert log. Okay, so this is not recommended, right? It will write more information if you give the debug. So debug option you have to use whenever you have any issues in the cluster level. You want to do some debugging in the cluster. So on that, in that moment only you can just go. Okay, for example, what I can do, let me enable this parameter and before, okay, I'm going to give debug 2. Okay, so let me save this. Before I restart, let me open the other session. So if you see, by default it is warning. Warning means it will just write the log information, info information. If you have any errors, fatal information, panic information, those kind of information, it will write figure default warning. Now I have changed to debug. Okay, so let me restart my cluster. We'll see what information it writes. It writes more information like all the system information. Sorry, restart. Okay. Now, if you see the alert log in the other session, okay, it is writing so much information, right? It is writing checkpoint information. It is writing the transaction ID information, and it is writing the frozen transaction ID information. Okay, and it is giving the replication has been started, replication slots has been started, and where it is writing the state of the replication slot, everything, and what is the xmin value required for that slot. Okay, and wraparound limit for this database, the OID of the limit has what level it has reached. Okay, this all information it will write in the alert log. Okay, so even the internal background system process, worker process, it writes the related to server process, everything. Okay, it writes everything in the information. If you see, the auto vacuum process is skipping for the template database. Okay, it writes this all kind of information in the alert log when you enable in the debugging mode. So this debugging is not recommended for the regular monitoring, but if you want to debug something if you have any issues and if you want to debug in that moment, you can enable the debug option. But otherwise, it's keep on writing in the alert log. There is no sessions connecting to this database, but still it is writing this much information. So if it writes this much information, then you have to think about the size of your logging process and the rotation, storage, everything you have to think, right? If it writes more information in the alert log, again, it's and your logging process will also become very busy. So in terms of performance also, you may have some issues. So this thing you have to keep in mind. So by default, uh, warning is enough for the normal regular databases. Okay. And okay, here we are. So this is one option, the values of the detailed information what you have to write. So this will come, if you give this debug file, then it will write still more information. It will write debug 4, debug 3, 2, and so on. It will write information, it will write the notice, everything it will write. Okay. This is something which we have to see. And if you come here, yeah, what to log. Okay. So either you want checkpoint information to be written in the alert log, whether you want the connections information, okay, whether you want the disconnections to be written in the alert log. So there is one more important parameter called log underscore statements. This one, whether you need DDL operations to be log, whether you need uh, none, or whether you need all operations to be written. Okay, mode means by default in the DML operations like inserts, updates, deletes, also it will write. Okay, if you give all, it will write everything, DDL, DML, and everything. Okay, so DML operations is not recommended to write in alert log. DDL operations, that's fine to be logged in alert log, because if any user drop a table or if they drop any column, we have to log, right? So, okay, let's go and enable this checkpoint. And log connections we need. We are going to make it on. Disconnections also we need. When the user logged in and when he has disconnected from the database. This information we need, right? And we also need log duration. We can make it on. And we have log underscore statements. This is very important. Okay, here if I make it all, we'll see what happens. Let me restart my cluster. You see, it is writing when the user has been connected, connection has received from the local, okay? And he has connected to this database Postgres. This is the database from this user, and application name, I connected with pSQL, right? So this is the connection which I connected with the pSQL. This information it is writing. And when I exit, it also writes the disconnection information, disconnection session. This is the session time. And from this database, I have logged out. Okay, this is the disconnection and connection also it writes. Okay, and if I write, for example, if I check any table slash DT to check the list of tables, right? Internally, what it is trying to run the query, this is the select statement, what it is trying to run. Okay, if I check, for example, a table, okay, what is the data I have? You see, even that information also it will write. Okay, see what all the statement information it will write in the logging information, whatever the queries which I have filed. If you see the statement, select star from actor, whatever I filed, it has written in the alert log. Okay, and even if you see when you do the insert statement, even this insert statement will also, it will capture. Okay, because we have enabled all right statement insert into. So basically in the logging, this is the format which it writes. It will just only log the information with the timestamp. But if you enable editing, it writes some extra information like from which user you have logged in and which statement you have executed. And it also writes the connection information, session ID, everything it will write when you enable editing. Okay, but in the logging, it will just default whatever statements you have, it's keep on writing. Okay, so this is something that we need to keep in mind when you enable the DML operations. It's keep on writing. So it's not recommended to write the DML operations. At least DDL is okay to just check who is the users has been dropped any table or any users, something like this. Okay. Otherwise, your logger process become very busy and your log will keep on grow. Okay. It's recommended to enable DDL operations in the log underscore statement, not all. Okay, so this is about the logging operation. The important thing is you have to change the format. Okay, because by default that format will be overwritten after every week. You can change the format to a different format like date format, like date, month, and year, so that it's keep on writing the log file every day and it will not overwrite. And based on your truncate option, rotation option, it will keep rotating your alert log. Okay. Yeah, so probably we can catch up tomorrow for some of the options like how we can enable row level security and how we can enable PG editing, and we'll also see how we can encrypt the data using PG crypto. Okay, these things we can see practically tomorrow. Any questions with today's session? Sadhan, Banu, Malati, any questions for today?
No solution.
Okay. Yeah. If no other questions, probably we can catch up tomorrow for the remaining practical part. Yeah. Thanks.